good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is the current state of Africa's young democracy and the disappointments that these so-called electoral democracies have also brought onto the continent. And it's out of this bad governance, high level of corruption with impunity and lack of rule of law that have also contributed to the current wave of protests, demonstrations by the youth and Gen Zs all across the continent. But last week's End Bad Governance protests that took place in Nigeria took a totally different turn. When you have the youth and Gen Zs protesting in Nigeria, waving Russian flags and calling on the military to intervene in Nigeria's governance, that's a big deal. That's a very, very big deal, fellows. I mean, you had these young folks in mainly the northern states, Kaduna, Kano, calling on the military to intervene via military coup in their government. How sad that is. How sad that is. And I can understand why, even though I strongly disagree with any military intervention in any form of government in any part of the world. Because I don't see any good thing that military intervention will bring to any country. Military intervention will end up being a dictatorial form of government. And that is the worst thing that any country wants in their country. But unfortunately, these youth and Gen Zs, they haven't seen anything better. They haven't seen anything better. Because mind you, fellows, most of these youth are around 30, 35 years of age. So all they have seen in their lifetime is these so-called electoral democratic governments in their various African countries. And what they have been seeing is the governance of their countries with impunity, tyranny, corruption, and lack of rule of law. So at the end of the day, what these people see, that democracy is not good for them, which is the unfortunate truth, fellows. Because if they had seen anything better out of these so-called elected democracies in their various African countries, there's no way they will be calling on the military to intervene in their countries. I'm sorry, it ain't happening. If you have seen anything better in your democratically elected governments, where the rule of law works, where there's minimal corruption, where there's no nepotism, religionism, tribalism, and so on, there's no way these young youth and Gen Zs will be going around calling for the military to intervene in their various African countries. It ain't happening. But all they have seen is bad governance, high level of corruption, impunity, and so on and so forth. So I can understand why these youth will even be waving Russian flag and calling for the military, which I beg to differ. But how did it get to this point? I mean, talking about pretty much very peaceful demonstration protest, with Lagos being so peaceful and other states all across Nigeria. But then when you look at the northern states and the northern cities, that is where you had these youth and Gen Zs waving Russian flags and calling on the military to intervene. And then when you look across these northern states, these are the states that also borders the Sahel. You have Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso up there. So you can understand why these people are waving Russian flags and also calling on the military to intervene. Because they're looking at their neighbors up there, Niger, Mali, and Burkina, and all they have seen is the current wave of military coups. That to some extent they think, I don't know why they think so, but they think maybe things are getting better in those countries compared to where they are in Nigeria. That's the unfortunate truth, fellas. This is the only reason why these folks will be waving Russian flags and calling on the military to intervene. What else would they be calling the military to intervene for? If they have seen good governance, corruption-free, good creative government, high unemployment rate, and good security from their government, how in the world would they be calling for military intervention? Heck no, it ain't happening. There's no way these youth and Gen Zs in these northern cities in Nigeria will be waving Russian flags and calling for military intervention. But they haven't seen anything better, fellas. All they have seen is poverty, hunger, bad roads, bad infrastructures, and so on and so forth. So what they are looking at across their borders to Niger, Mali, and Burkina is this new wave of military governments. And for whatever reason, they think those governments are doing better for their citizens down there. So they tend to believe that when they have military government in Nigeria also, that will be good for Nigeria. But I'm sorry, fellas. Let me be clear and loud to these folks. That's a big, big, big mistake. No matter how bad you think your government is in Nigeria right now, there's no way a military government in any form or shape is better for any country. Because military governments always start like this. They start like this and they become dictatorial and so on and so forth. In the end, it's the citizens that end up suffering. So the idea of calling for military intervention should never happen in any country because that is the wrong message. As a matter of fact, I heard about 7 or 10 Polish students apparently who were allegedly involved in these demonstrations have so far been arrested. And the Polish government is also calling for their release because they don't believe they contributed to anything. But whatever the case is, the point of the matter is, I was strongly in favor of this end bad governance protest in Nigeria, which I've been in support of all these protests all across the continent because I really believe that it is up to the citizens of these various African countries to protest these bad governors by their various African countries. That is the only way that things can change gradually in their various African countries. And there's nothing wrong to protest bad governance. Like I stated earlier, if you look at the protests that took place in Lagos and other states, there were no problems. Everything went well down there. But when it comes to the northern cities, in the northern states, that's where you saw these Russian flags and people calling for the military takeover and so on and so forth. So the problem is what these people in these northern states have been experiencing for some time now. And they see their neighbors to the north under the military coup government thinking that they're doing better. So they're also thinking that having a military government in their country will be better off than having the civilian government, which they haven't produced any good governance. All they have produced for them is high level of corruption, impunity, bad governance, lack of rule of law. So this is what citizens will do. These are hungry citizens, fellas. At the end of the day, when you live in a system where there's lack of rule of law, where there's bad governance, where there's high level of corruption, where the elites govern with impunity, people will break down and be asking for anything. So I can understand why these young youths in these northern cities and states were waving Russian flags. By the end of the day, it's up to the Nigerian government to take this issue very seriously. And not just Nigerian government, all the governments across the continent. Because these protests have been going all over the continent. It happened in Kenya, it happened in Gambia, it's happening in Nigeria, and it's going to spread all across the continent. So at the end of the day, it is the governments that have to change their ways to meet the demands of their citizens and stop this high level of corruption, bad governance, as well as this lack of rule of law. Because for citizens of a country to wave another country's flag and demanding for military takeover, it goes way beyond what the government is doing. That tells you exactly that there's something wrong in that country and on the continent of Africa. It is unfortunate, but that is the reality, fellows. As a matter of fact, I listened to Olusegun Obasanjo in an interview he did maybe a year ago or so, where he even lamented there are a lot of politicians in Nigeria and across Africa that shouldn't even be in office today. They should be behind bars. They should be behind bars. This was coming from Olusegun Obasanjo, a former president of Nigeria. I didn't see it. You can Google it. In his own words, there are some politicians in Nigeria and around Africa that don't deserve to be in office, but rather to be in prison. This is coming from Olusegun Obasanjo. So this tells you exactly what is going on in most of these countries all across the continent. I mean, if you have a former president coming out stating it clearly that there are some people in offices all across the continent that deserve to be in prison because of corruption, then what else do you expect when you have your youth who have no jobs, lack of security, bad governance, and so on and so forth? What do you expect from them? This is their only cry they have. And their cry will be to go outside and protest, and unfortunately, believe that if you have a military takeover, things are going to get better. But unfortunately, military takeover doesn't make things better. Even though those in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, I mean, they are doing whatever they can do right now. But at the end of the day, I don't support any military takeover of any country, period. Because that's the bad form of governance, period. The best form of governance is you people going out there to choose your own leaders and kick your bad leaders out and keep replacing them until you get it right. It's going to take a while. It takes time. It's not an easy thing. If in the United States of America, it didn't start like what we see right now in America. It took a lot of cycles for them to get it right. I'm sorry, as a matter of fact, going back to the first president of United States of America, in his own words, George Washington once said he didn't believe in party politics. When the American politics started forming into parties, he said party politics was a bad system for America. He believed that individuals should get elected to Congress, to the presidency, and to the Senate for them to be responsible and to be real representatives of their constituents. By immediately you involve party politics, it becomes a club where now the elected representatives don't represent the interest of their constituents, but they go about representing the interest of the club, which is the party. So I'm staunchly against party politics, and I've said this before numerous times, that party politics is one of the worst things of Africa. And look at your various African countries, and you can tell you have representatives who go to parliament or Congress, and they don't represent the interest of their constituents, but rather represent the interest of what the party wants, the party boss's interest. And it's very rampant all across the continent. So I'm staunchly against party politics. I believe in individuals being elected to Congress or Parliament or whatever you have it in your various African countries, where they represent the interest of their constituents. So they are not held hostage by any party. But unfortunately, you people have been made to believe that because the West have parties and so on and so forth, somehow it is good to vote for parties. So people even vote for parties voting against their own interests when they have somebody who can represent them better, but they rather vote for the party just because that's the party they belong to. And unfortunately, that is part of the problem that we face on the continent today. So fellas, it is very unfortunate. I mean, Russia. I mean, I don't even fathom the idea. I cannot even fathom the idea that these people will be waving Russian flag as if Russia is a country to look up to. I mean, we talk about dictatorship in Russia. China. These are all dictatorial governments. How in the world, if you're going to even wave a flag of a country, you're going to wave a dictatorial government? China and Russia. It is unfortunate. It is very unfortunate because a lot of these people, like I said, have come to believe based on what they've seen around them. And they've seen these Russians in Niger and Burkina Faso with the Wagner group and so on and so forth. And they tend to think that these people are providing security and therefore helping them stabilize their various countries around the Sahel. So they think they will be better for Nigeria as well. I'm sorry, fellas. It ain't happening. That is the last thing to look up to. But it is the failure of the government of Nigeria that have also contributed to this level of youth waving Russian flags and calling for military intervention. Because the government hasn't done its due job that it's supposed to do. That is the problem. If the government had done what it's supposed to do in terms of security, in terms of providing jobs, in terms of good governance, and rule of law, to govern according to what the constitution says in their various African countries, and Nigeria included in particular, then you wouldn't have your citizens going or protesting, waving another country's flag. I mean, can you imagine American citizens in America going around waving Russian flag in protest? For what? Why would American citizens be waving a Russian flag or Chinese flag? It's not happening. Because there's no way you can say that they are living in a bad condition in America than in Russia or China. It ain't happening. If they are protesting against their government based on something that is happening in America. It's going to be American flag that they'll be waving. They ain't waving no damn foreign country's flag, let alone Russia. But when you live in a system, you live in a dictatorial system disguised as electoral democratic system, then that is what is going to happen. Because you haven't seen anything better. All you've seen is bad governance, dictatorship disguised in the form of electoral democracies. That is what these kids have seen. These kids haven't seen anything better in Nigeria. If they have seen something better, there's no way they will do that. But they haven't. So to some extent, I understand where these kids are coming from. I understand where these youth are coming from. Because if you've been in a system where things are working the way they're supposed to work, there's no way you'll be calling for military intervention. There's no way. That is why this thing is a wake-up call to the government of Nigeria. It is a wake-up call, because at the end of the day, you have to look inward and ask yourselves what you are doing wrong and how to resolve this issue. Because at the end of the day, if you don't take steps to resolve this issue, this will become a bigger problem in the near future. And it's not just Nigeria, it's all across the continent. Just about what was going on in Kenya, calling for Ruto to resign and so on and so forth. It is happening all across the continent. And all this has to do with high level of corruption, bad governance, with impunity, disregard of the rule of law, and abuse of power. That is all this has to do. And these kids and these students and youth and Gen Zs and so on, they are fed up with the kind of governments that have been policies that have been adopted by their governments in their various African countries. These guys are fed up. So at the end of the day, they will do everything that they have to do, even if what they are doing is wrong, because they don't see anything that is good. They haven't seen anything better. So I don't blame them. It is unfortunate for such things to be happening in this modern era. But you have nobody to blame by the government of these various African countries. And you have nobody to blame by the government of Nigeria. They have contributed to the problem that these youth have to rise up and wave Russian flag and demand for the military to intervene in their country. I mean, that's sad. That is very, very, very unfortunate. That's very, very unfortunate, you know. I mean, this should never happen. This should never happen. But like the old saying goes, you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. You have used party politics, religionism, tribalism to divide and rule people in your various African countries. And at the end of the day, these people are going to come back later and bite you. And that is how it starts. It starts with little protests like this. And eventually, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But you have to find a solution to this problem. And it starts with leadership. It starts with leadership. You have to cut down on the level of corruption, the bureaucracies that have existed in these African countries who are ruling with impunity, disregarding the rights of their fellow African citizens, and the use of power ruthlessly without taking into consideration of that the people that they are governing are also fellow citizens of their various African countries. It is unfortunate, fellows. It is unfortunate. But like I stated also, at the end of the day, it is up to you, the citizens. You have other avenues, no matter how corrupt or bad governance in your various African countries. Use your electoral process to make changes. Don't fall into this old trap that they keep using, keep pushing on you guys, where you guys go and vote because of the race or a religion and tribalism and so on and so forth. So you go out there and vote against your own interest. So use your vote to enact the necessary changes that you want in your various African countries. So fellas, that's all I have for today. If it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Thank you and peace and love.